as many as 500 women and children dead off the coast of Greece. You might have heard that a ship full of migrants sunk off the coast of Greece. Here is the kicker. All 104 survivors are all men. Why? Because they stuck the women and children inside the bowls of the ship where it is hot with no way out, and they were out in the open air, 'cause of course they were. I am so angry at how sexism and religion makes men's lives worth more than that of women and kids. I am so sick of these men literally having their foot on the necks of women where women die because their lives are worth nothing in the eyes of these men. They get to live while the women and kids are dead. So tired of reading things like this, and also that 9 of 10 people discriminate against women. People, my sisters. That means that we as women discriminate against other women also. Please let's change that and support one another, because we can't expect the men to change. We have to do it ourselves. Edit. Here is the article since people were asking about it. Edit from the article, quote, all 104 survivors were men aged between 16 and 40. Authorities said. Most spent the night in a warehouse in the port. They're from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria and Egypt, said Yorgos Farvas, Kalamata's deputy mayor. Edit. Scroll down in the article and there is a video of the overcrowded ship. To give you an idea of how many people were crowded on that ship. I hadn't heard about this until your post. That's so horrible. I can't imagine the terror those women and children felt during however long it took for the ship to sink. Rushed face. Rest in peace to every one of them. Dove peace symbol. Holy fuck. The whole women and children first, I believe, may be a myth. I have been looking into more shipwrecks lately. Apropos of nothing. And many of the survivors are men, despite a mixed amount of people on the ship. I am certain 100 years ago, our petticoats, etc., were certain death. Understandably. But it is easy to see in a world full of misogynic attitudes. Not many men were going to prioritize a woman. I remember seeing horrific photos from the recent famine in Yemen, showing skeletal women and gaunt children with distended bellies. The men looked healthy and well fed. According to the article, the smugglers would lock people up to gain control. Sounds like they locked up the wives' mothers' children in order to keep the men submissive. This is because they were smuggling those people out of their countries for $. They make the men stay up top to help. They shove all the women in the bottom of what is essentially a glorified raft. They know they aren't seaworthy. They don't care. This happened before in Crete, but there wasn't a big article on it. It's disgusting how they treat them like cattle. TBF. It's possible that they were inside because outside can be cold and wet and windy. Sometimes safety instincts are horribly wrong. I don't know, but I would suspect they will be almost slaves working in agriculture or something. Remember the tsunami of 2004? Most of the dead were women and children. Religion is literally destroying this planet. How desperate must you be to risk your children's lives? Humans suck. 500 women and kids pleading face. That makes me so sad. I can't imagine what they were going through leading up to that. I knew a Chinese East Timorese refugee. He was about 6 years old at the time, who says they were on the docks trying to get onto boats whilst being actively fired upon as there was not enough room. It became women and children first, and his father was left behind. Eventually his father managed to also make it out. Men always proudly proclaim they are protectors. But goddamn do they have a hard time acting on it. Rest in peace those poor souls, blue heart, purple heart. Just checked the news. And not seeing anything that states only men survived. At least 100 children did die, and that is horrific. Where in the article you linked or any other online do you get the idea that sexism played into the deaths? It seems just as plausible the women and children being inside the ship was actually to protect them from the elements of being outside. Also seems young men surviving this tragedy is the most likely outcome given the physical nature of surviving it. The article itself links to how exhausted even the young men were being rescued. It's a tragedy. Politicizing or ideologizing it with zero reason to do so isn't the correct response. This is a racist rant, plain and simple. Those men aged 16–40. 16 is still a kid. They are all victims too. They were forced on top to provide room for women and children down below to protect from the elements. They lost wives, mothers, brothers, sisters. Blaming them as if they wanted this or are just happy with surviving is appalling. They are traumatized and most likely have PTSD. Furthermore, it may have been the traffickers who forced this on you. Argue against anyone who brings that valid argument here. You're a racist. On the Titanic, women children first was interpreted by one officer as women and children only, resulting in lifeboats being launched with empty seats. Another officer filled empty seats with men once available children, and women were boarded. Tallies afterward pegged survival at 74 for women, 52 for children and 20 for men. Wow. So sad to read about. R.I.P. The racism in this thread is disgusting. I guess they were inside because they were more protected there. I don't understand what you're trying to push here. Also, most refugees are usually young men because they're the fittest to survive the navigation to come here and often send money home. Let's not pit some poor desperate migrants against others. Migrants aren't angels, but their flaws should not be the focus in tragedies like this. Wow, some of the comments here are gross. Yeah, not surprised that people in this sub don't really empathize unless the women are white Americans or Europeans. From an evolutionary point of view, it's moronic. If you go on a sea voyage, you always want to sacrifice the men to save the women and children purely because men can't continue the species by themselves. The Maori people would often take women often pregnant on their long voyages to distant lands. And the men were seen as expendable purely because they were more likely to survive a catastrophe. And they weren't as intrinsically valuable as women or the children they bore. I worked with immigrants and asylum seekers for a while, and lots of these young boys and men have a very misogynistic view on life. Sometimes, even when faced with a class of women who say we are human too, they just wouldn't try to change or challenge their own cultural views on genders. But misogyny is in every country on earth. Lots of women from Europe hate women too. I was often asked about having children and fulfilling my role as a woman. Well, I feel fulfilled enough, so that's a shocker. Rip to these innocent women and kids. Couldn't it be they were inside so they are more protected from the cold and wind? That was my initial thought. I don't think it's about sexism. Human smugglers often separate families. It is terrible news all the same. Greece has even been caught ditching migrants at sea.